Hello, and welcome to today's call with Congressman Johnny Olszewski. During the call, we'll be taking questions from constituents like you. To ask a question, please press star 3 now. You may also sign up for his newsletter by pressing star 6 at any time during the call. Again, please press star 3 now to ask a question and star 6 to subscribe to the Congressman's newsletter. With that, I'll now turn it over to Congressman Johnny Olszewski.
Thanks so much, and good evening, everyone. It is an honor to have you with us here tonight, and it's an honor to represent Maryland's 2nd Congressional District here in Congress, and to welcome you to tonight's Town Hall, our 4th since I was sworn in earlier this year, in addition to many other community forums we've held throughout the district. Tonight, we are fortunate to be joined by a truly distinguished guest, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut, who serves as ranking member of the House Appropriations Committee. She brings deep insight into the challenging federal budget landscape that we currently face here in Congress. I'm especially grateful for this chance to connect with you directly at a time of both opportunity, but also a time of strain. Sadly, we gather tonight in the shadow of yet another tragedy, the assassination of political commentator Charlie Kirk last week. This horrific act adds to a troubling list of political violence, including, but certainly not limited to, the attacks on both Congresswoman Gabby Giffords and House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, to the assault on Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman, and even the attempted assassination of President Trump. I did not share many of Charlie Kirk's views, but I respect his right to have had them and to speak freely, and for the right of his supporters to assemble peacefully. These are sacred freedoms enshrined in our First Amendment. We can and we should disagree vigorously when necessary, but violence can never be the answer. On the whiteboard in my office here in Washington is a simple reminder: in all things, it is better to hope than to despair. But tonight, I pray that our country can unite around the fundamental value that every person deserves to be safe. It's time that we lower the temperature of our political discourse and remember our shared humanity. Congresswoman DeLauro embodies that spirit of constructive engagement. She and I are determined to work across the aisle to pass a responsible budget, one that avoids a needless government shutdown and that delivers for the American people. The deadline for that shutdown is September 30th. And just today, we received a proposal from the GOP House majority. Let me be clear: a bad budget or a showdown is a false choice. Compromise is possible, but we should not compromise on the imperative to lower the cost of living for Americans. We are now at day 256 into this congressional session without a single vote to lower the cost of groceries, gas, rent, or childcare. Instead, the president and congressional extremists are actually making life more difficult and less affordable for hardworking families. Between the chaotic trade wars and taking an axe to both healthcare and food programs that millions of Americans rely on, no one should have to choose between paying rent or feeding their family or going to the doctor. And the so-called big, beautiful bill is now law and already threatening higher prices for working families. Nearly $1 trillion of healthcare cuts that will kick 15 million people off their healthcare plans, rising prices across the board. Devastating cuts to the Affordable Care Act that will hit Americans in just a few months, with premiums estimated to increase by over 75% on average. The Republican bill gutted critical energy programs, too, that lowered prices for families and small businesses. Now these families are facing higher utility bills every month, with the average price of electricity increasing 7% since last year and a staggering 32% increase compared to 5 years ago. So our responsibility is clear. We must provide real relief to American families and pass a timely, responsible budget. With that said, it's now my privilege to welcome Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, who has served with distinction as the ranking member of the House Appropriations Committee for the past 5 years, the second woman ever to hold that post. First elected in 1991 to represent Connecticut's 3rd District, she has built a career championing American working families. She fights to raise the minimum wage, secure paid sick days and paid family leave, and to guarantee equal pay for equal work. In these budget negotiations, as always, she is a tireless advocate for opportunity and fairness. Congresswoman, I'm honored to welcome you and grateful that you could join me and my constituents this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Johnny. I'm so delighted to be here with you tonight, and I want to just say thank you for hosting what is an important discussion. And as you pointed out early in your remarks, I too concur that there is no place in our public discourse for rhetoric that inflames people from wherever they're coming from, and that physical violence has no place in our in our lives, in our political lives, which is what we're talking about here tonight. So I want to say a thank you to everyone for tuning in this evening. And Congressman Olszewski has emerged as a leader, even in the first term in the House of Representatives, fighting to expand access to housing, looking for good paying jobs, talking about championing community colleges, career technical education, supporting small business innovation, and fighting against what are destructive policies, particularly the President Trump's attacks on our federal workers. He has also been leading the fight to tackle the cost of living crisis, as he pointed out, tracking the number of session days where there have been Republicans have refused to vote to lower costs. To no one's surprise, it is all of these days. Johnny, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is 256 days, as you said today, as of today. You have a fighter in Congressman Olszewski, and I'm proud to serve in this body with him. I am Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro. I'm the ranking member on the House Appropriations Committee. And just a little bit of background, I view appropriations at the center of everything that the federal government does. Funding the government through this process is all about responding to the needs of the American people with federal investments. We have 12 funding bills, which we work on each year. They touch every aspect of our lives, from protecting the air that we breathe, the water we drink, to investing in new cures, treatments, and new research to help hardworking people access housing. So the Appropriations Committee responds to Americans' needs. The 12 funding bills must be passed on an annual basis to keep the government open and functioning and to continue providing services that help each of our communities. Now, these bills require, it's one of the only pieces of legislation that require support from both Democrats and Republicans in the House and in the Senate in order for the bills to become law, which is why we find ourselves in a situation which is dire. I would tell you, having been in negotiations for the last several days, last several weeks, my Republican colleagues have chosen a partisan route. And there are a number who have decided they would rather take us to the brink of a government shutdown instead of lowering the costs for millions of Americans and preventing people from getting really kicked off of their health care. A shutdown could delay payments like Social Security, veterans benefits, and keeping in mind that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are in charge. So this is where they want to go if they did without talking. We had talked about trying to come to a bipartisan agreement on moving forward, but that hasn't happened. And I will explain in a second. The shutdown could delay payments like Social Security, veterans benefits, and we have their leadership, that is Speaker Johnson and Senator Thune, who have refused to meet with our Democratic leadership, and that is Leader Jeffries and Senator Schumer, in order to discuss how you try to move forward. But the funding bills that we have been provided with so far have been unilaterally partisan bills, where they have dealt with a lot of reckless cuts and harmful policies that have been rejected, I might add, on a bipartisan basis. We are now 9 months into this administration, weeks away from the end of the fiscal year. The cost of living crisis has only gotten worse under President Trump. Americans are struggling with rising costs of everyday necessities. They live paycheck to paycheck, literally. That is very true. But we see President Trump and the House Republicans are not laser focused on the cost of living crisis. So instead of lowering prices, they passed a bill to cut $1 trillion from Medicaid and from the Affordable Care Act, which will strip health care coverage from more than 15 million people. There will be over $500 billion in cuts to Medicare that get triggered by this law, which, as we know, will be harmful to America's seniors. In their signature law, they slashed nutrition benefits for poor families, which will cause an additional 1 million kids in the United States to go hungry. And the counter to this is they did all this in order to pass trillions of dollars in tax cuts for the biggest corporations and for billionaires. They will add $4 trillion to the national debt over the next 10 years. You don't have to take my word for it. It really is in all the studies about what has been done. They have doubled down on their attacks on middle class, working class, and the vulnerable. Last week, they passed a funding bill that assaults public health, that slashes medical research, eliminates funding for reproductive health, and eviscerates education and job training. They used the bill not to right the wrongs of what is the big, ugly bill, but to make healthcare even more expensive and to slash research. This is research, I might add, into life-saving cures. They have cut funding for the National Institutes of Health, for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. This is the slash funding for state and local health departments, substance use prevention and treatment, mental health services, biomedical research. They eliminated funding for the tobacco prevention and the HIV/AIDS prevention and treatment. They have continued a full-scale attempt to eliminate public education. They decimate support for children in K through 12 elementary schools and threaten the future of an entire generation. At a time, as I've been saying, where families around the country are struggling, people struggle day to day to afford health care, housing, other essentials for their families. They have forced their agriculture funding bill through the committee, and the bill fails to provide WIC, that's women, infants, and children, with the resources it needs to help Americans keep food on their tables. The 2026 funding bills are all cut from the same cloth. They help major companies, they help billionaires grow their power, raise prices on the backs of middle class and working class. Hardworking Americans suffer while they are protecting and lining the pockets of billionaires and big corporations. Beyond these extreme bills, the Trump administration and the president has carried out the mass firing of federal workers. That goes beyond weakening our government's ability to function. It shatters the lives of hardworking individuals who have dedicated their careers to public service. These workers, many of whom live in Maryland's 2nd Congressional District and may be tuning in to tonight's call, now face an uncertain future, leaving their families in distress. President Trump has been guided by Project 2025. The author of that, and now the Office of Director of the Office of Management and Budget, Russ Vought, is also unlawfully stealing the funds that this is Democrats and Republicans in the House and the Senate, have appropriated dollars, which are now being taken away for utilization of other purpose than they were intended to be used. And we passed into law these bills and appropriated funds that go to mental health services, that go to apprenticeship programs, that go to transportation programs, and that has been taken away. There's about $410 billion in money that has been withheld from families, from farmers, from children, from small business, and communities in every part of the country. The courts, who have been our friends, have concluded that the administration's disregard for our nation's spending law has harmed every corner of the country. Children in elementary schools have been denied resources they need to succeed. Farmers and rural communities have been left to fend for themselves. Communities have been robbed of resources to keep people safe. And Russ's vote has stripped away hope from cancer patients and made the cost of living crisis even worse for working families. Make no mistake, Russ vote, and he has so stated, look, I don't make this up. He said the process, the appropriations process, should be less bipartisan. I think all of us, all of you out there, want us to have a great deal more bipartisanship in going forward. He would like to see a shutdown. He wants the country to continue spiraling into chaos so that he can continue to steal the funds that we have appropriated from our communities. Democrats, we're ready to move forward. Do not want to see the government shut down, want to fund the government in a bipartisan way. This is what we have agreed to do, and that has now been abrogated. Democrats want to lower the cost of living, deliver critical services and investments to all Americans. That can be achieved through bipartisan cooperation to pass annual funding bills signed into law by President Trump. Cannot be achieved through a Republican shutdown or another full-year continuing resolution that puts billionaires, big corporations, and unelected bureaucrats over the American people. I'm so delighted to be here with you tonight. It's a snapshot of what's going on. Happy to answer any questions. And like so many of you, I'm hoping that we can move forward from this period onward. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. For those of you just joining us, I'd like to remind you that we'll be taking questions from constituents like you live. To ask a question, please press *3. Also, if you would like to sign up for the Congressman's newsletter, please press *6 at any time during the call. Again, that's *3 to ask a question and *6 to sign up for the Congressman newsletter. Congressman, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. And thanks again, Congresswoman DeLauro, for your insights tonight. I know that you may not be able to stay for the entirety, so I'm eager to get to the phone lines in just a moment here. But as we're waiting for those questions to come in, maybe just to kick things off, could you talk a little bit about the rescissions that have been put forward by this administration? For us in the Baltimore area, we're especially concerned about the threats to things like the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which you and other members of Congress put in place, and the threats and the concerns about both what has happened and also what might be. If you could just talk a little bit about the concerns around rescissions, that would be great.
Sure. And let me just understand, and when we use the word rescissions, and I say to people out there, as I said to you, Democrats, Republicans, House, and the Senate have passed appropriations bills which deal with the funding of the bridge, which deal with, as I mentioned, substance use, prevention programs, mental health services, transportation programs, defense, etc. Now, the Constitution provides the power of the purse in the Congress. So the stealing, what I call the stealing of these funds by the director of the Office of Management and Budget, is against the law. It is illegal for them to be doing this. Don't just listen to me. That has been opined by the Supreme Court. Justice Scalia, who was no liberal torchbearer, has said that the president doesn't have any inherent authority to abrogate the funds that have been appropriated by the Congress. Now, they did that with $9 billion. And part of what I've talked at the 410, they have frozen, they have terminated up to $410 billion, which we said yes to in a bipartisan way. They now come forward with a procedure in which if a bill, if funding is likely to expire, and we have 45 days, if they want to rescind the funds, we have 45 days to make a determination of whether those funds should be rescinded or not. But if the funds expire before the 45 days are up, because September 30th is the date when the fiscal year, then they are allowed to steal those funds back. No, the Congress has got to decide that. OMB director and the president does not decide that. That is part of the issue at stake here today. And what we are trying to do in moving forward with this continuing resolution is to build into it a mechanism that says, if we have come to a determination, House, Senate, Democrats, Republicans have said this is the way the money should be sent, that we can't have an unelected bureaucrat decide that that is not the case. That is the nature of the discussion we're holding now. The other part of this is that since they have abrogated and they pulled away so much of the health care, whether it is being Medicaid, Medicare, nursing homes, community hospitals, rural hospitals, the National Institutes of Health, et cetera, that has got to be built back into our being able to move forward, because you can't take away the public's health care.
Thanks for that, Rosa. Appreciate it. Well, I think at this point we can turn things back over to you to open up the line to folks who are calling in to ask a question.
Great. Thank you, Congressman. We'll go ahead and start off with Lynn, who joins us from Carroll County. Lynn, you're live on the call. Please go ahead with your question. Lynn, you're live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead with your question. All right, it looks like we're having trouble connecting with Lynn. However, I do have her question here ready, and I'll go ahead and ask that on her behalf. And Lynn asks, if the Republicans will not give on any issues we find most dear, will the Democrats still go for it?
I think that what our leadership has said, both the House and Senate, is that, and which just so that you know, we had a meeting last week with the Democrats and the Republicans setting up the Appropriations Committee, and we said that, and there was a consensus around this, that we would deal with a bipartisan move forward in terms of this continuing resolution to keep the government open. Quite honestly, that has not happened. They have not and will not address our democratic priorities, which is one of the things that I have said and our leadership has said, that the democratic priorities have got to be addressed. Amongst those priorities are the healthcare issues. That is the central piece that they have cut so much from healthcare and put the nation's public health in jeopardy. That's not something that we could be for. The other piece of that is, as I have said, we need a mechanism that extends the funding on that money that has been taken away for the program that have been already appropriated. And our leadership has, that is Congressman Jeffries and Senator Schumer, that they will not get Democratic votes if we cannot move to incorporating democratic priorities.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Just to put a finer point on Rosa's point about the healthcare, is it's not just the cuts that have already been made. We have subsidies that are keeping healthcare affordable for millions of Americans that are also set to expire at the end of the year. And Democrats and Rosa and her leadership and others on the Appropriations Committee in the negotiations are trying to make sure that those healthcare subsidies stay in place to keep healthcare affordable for Americans, just as I'm also working with her and others to push to make sure that we don't see those rescissions and cuts after we have that bipartisan deal. So lots of work ahead. I appreciate the question there.
Right, I do. And it's healthcare in its broadest scope. The congressman talked about the subsidies, which are critical. And, these costs are going to go up, October 1st. That's going to begin very soon. And so, but again, it is a broad spectrum of healthcare, which it has 15 million people will be jettisoned from Medicaid. And that's unacceptable, But thanks for the question. Good question.
Thank you both. Our next question comes from Nate, who joins us from Baltimore. Nate, you're live on the call. Please go ahead with your question.
Yes, hello, Representative Johnny. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Nate. How are you?
I am terrific. Thanks for asking. Really quickly, I just wanted to know how far you are along in getting enough votes for a vote on releasing the Epstein files.
I appreciate the question, Nate. And I have to say that at this point, the Epstein situation feels like a complete cover-up. This is something that we know the president has been told by his attorney general that he is, in fact, in these files. I would think that if the president had nothing to hide or nothing to be embarrassed of, that this would be a chance for him to clear his name by releasing those files. In fact, we've seen quite the opposite of that. We've seen extreme resistance from this administration, from the Department of Justice, and from many Republicans, not all, because we've actually seen some Republicans sign what's called a discharge petition, which would force a vote on a law that would require the release of all these files. We are now just one vote away, one signature on that petition to force a vote in the House of Representatives towards the release of the Epstein files. And so we are pushing for it. I know that Congresswoman DeLauro and I are both on that discharge petition to release those files. This is a real opportunity to have that transparency that Americans deserve. The crimes that Epstein committed were absolutely heinous, and anyone, and I mean anyone, who's associated with it should be held accountable, and that's what we're seeking to do in this space. So I appreciate the question. Rosa, if you have anything you want to add there, you're welcome to, or we can certainly move on.
One vote away. Hopefully, one of our Republican colleagues will come forward and sign on, because the crimes are heinous, and it's unspeakable what was done to young girls and to women. It just can't stand. And but I'm proud of the unity of purpose on behalf of Democrats and also those who have joined us. One more vote. That's what it takes.
And I have to say, that vote will come. That vote will come whether it is another Republican who has the courage to sign, or from the newest member of New Mexico who is about to be elected in a special election and will join the ranks of this Congress. So it will happen. It's just a question of time. And I hope that we find another Republican in the meantime, though, to do it so that we can move sooner rather than later on the issue.
Thank you both. We'll move to our next question. Next, we have Gail, who joins us from Towson. Gail, you're live on the call. Please go ahead with your question.
Yes, my question is, how stable is the funding for Medicare?
Johnny, you have to be very
You're
concerned.
the expert, Rosa. Yeah, please, you go first.
Okay, I'm happy to take that on, because thank you. Because I think most people have begun to understand the seriousness of the cut to Medicaid, and 15 million people will be, kicked off their Medicaid. But what happens? And again, you can read about this, etc. The bill that they passed increases the federal debt by $4.5 trillion. Okay. Now, there is a cap on the deficit. When you breach that cap and go over that number, which has now been done, that triggers what they call a cut across the board, sequestration. Now, some things are exempt. Social Security is exempt from that, but Medicare is not exempt. That is a $500 billion cut to Medicare. And that's something that people are not aware of these days. But by going into debt, another $4.5 trillion, going above the debt, the debt cap, it's something that's called pay as you go. We're supposed to, if we're going to pay for, do something, we have to pay for it. But if you breach the pay as you go law, then you have to have just cut across the board, the sequestration.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Congressman, would you like anything to add, or would you like me to move ahead to our first poll question?
I'll just say, just generally, we have to find ways to be more sustainable in all of our programs, and these deep cuts are kicking people off of the programs they rely on. The debt is piling up. There's not a lot of fiscal responsibility. It is deeply troubling, and I think the ranking member did a good job of explaining what's at stake here and what some of the challenges are. Let's go ahead and go to that poll question.
Absolutely. So our first poll question tonight is, do you approve or disapprove of the Trump administration's deployment of the National Guard to American cities, potentially including Baltimore City, without the consent of local officials? I'll repeat the question. Do you approve or disapprove of the Trump administration's deployment of the National Guard to American cities, potentially including Baltimore City, without the consent of local officials? Press 1 if you approve, and press 2 if you disapprove. And again, for those who've come on the call recently, if you'd like to ask a question live on tonight's call, you can press star 3 at any time. We'll go ahead and move to our next caller. Next, joining us is Diana, who joins us from Sykesville. Diana, you're live on the call. Please go ahead with your question.
Hi, Johnny. I don't condone violence, but I also do not condone using our military service members as a threat to our community, especially if the White House administration wants to send them into Baltimore City. My husband has served for 21 years, and as a military family has lived on multiple military installations. Our service members, when they came home from work, when they were stateside, they didn't wear their tactical gear or anything throughout our community. It felt safe. Watching our military service members going into communities with their tactical gear feels very unsafe. And I want to know how this could be stopped, not just for Baltimore City, but other U.S. states, because it is very triggering to see our service members in uniform and tactical gear in our everyday community. It doesn't feel safe. I want to know what's going to be done to stop this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. It's good to hear from you. And what I will say is that this is just another action from this administration that likely illegal. And certainly they found that it was illegal in the California instance. It's definitely unhelpful as someone who led a local government as Baltimore County executive, and it's directly at odds with some of the improvements that we've seen, especially in the city of Baltimore. And let me say this, we can and we should always do better. We need to keep pushing to keep our communities safer. People need to be safer and feel safer. But the truth is, there's no crime emergency. In fact, in Baltimore, crime is at historic lows, even as we've seen this administration gut millions and millions of dollars of funding for the programs that have made progress possible, including support for police departments. Violent crime in Baltimore is at a 26% decrease this year. Homicides are at the lowest level in a decade. So what we want to be clear is about what the data actually is. And while we welcome federal support and federal partnership, because we want to do whatever we can to make our cities and our towns and our communities safer, there's a way to do it. And setting aside the legal argument, what I worry about, truthfully, is that in other countries, taking the military, taking armed forces, and then having them become law enforcement vehicles within a country is one of the steps that is taken in more authoritarian regimes. And so we have to be very careful, and I think all of the concerns that you raised as well are valid, that we shouldn't be normalizing and okay with the fact that we have a president that is so willing to take our military and take them into cities under the guise of public safety. And so I'm deeply concerned about it, but we're going to speak out about it from policy, political, legal grounds and continue to call out those actions. I actually joined Congressman Mfume in sending a letter to the president asking him to reconsider the actions proposing to send troops in Baltimore. And I think it's wrong there, just as I think it's wrong around the country. And Rosa, I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in if you wanted to add anything.
No, I don't. I think you've said it very, very well. We all want our communities to be safe, but there is a way to work in concert with local government, with local police departments, et cetera, to create an atmosphere and an environment where people in our community do feel safe. And it's just not being done in the right way. But you've said it absolutely beautifully, Johnny.
Yeah, appreciate that. And because of programs that you helped write and support, honestly, is when I was a local executive, there were federal programs that allowed us to hire more police officers and more firefighters and more first responders.
Right.
Those are the kinds of supports that we should be encouraging, and that the former local elected official I welcomed, and then as a member of Congress, I would support as well. So there's a way to do it. The National Guard and the military is not it.
Yeah, and just one point on that, and some of these appropriations bills, there's actually a cutback in law enforcement funds, which is not the way we help communities, not the way we help cities to be able to manage. So, the answer is not sending in the military. It is working with local police departments. What kind of resources do you need? How do we help you do this? And how do we work in concert with one another?
Thank you both. We'll move on to our next caller. Next, we have Dave, who joins us from Carroll County. Dave, you're live on the call. Please go ahead with your question.
Good evening.
Dave.
You had the House, Senate, and the presidency under President Joe Biden. And the Epstein files weren't a problem. Why are they so important now?
Dave, thank you for the question. What I can tell you is I don't want to speak for any other member of Congress. As you know, or I think you know, or happy to share. I mean, I've been a member for about 6 months now. I think we should have had it released before, and I don't want to speak for a prior administration as to why it was or wasn't a priority. But I think that as Democrats, we also have to own our own stuff too. And I clearly think that it's something that could happen, should have been released before. But I also don't think that failure to do the right thing in a prior time is a reason to not do the right thing, in the moment now in front of us. And so I would say I think that's a fair point to raise. But I think that calling for it is the right thing to do. It's something that actually has a bipartisan level of support, and it's something that I think we hope to see while we're in this Congress.
I think you said it well, Congressman. Mistakes were made. Well, that doesn't mean you repeat the mistakes. But one of the other pieces was there was a very high incidence or high priority by candidate Trump and President Trump to talk about making the files public, and it was a very central part of the campaign, etc. So that being the case, then it would seem that if you want to say there was a mistake in the past, I don't want to repeat that mistake. In addition to which, I want to do it differently. But now I don't want to do it differently. I want to hide those files for one reason or another. So that's the situation that we're currently in. It's not a question of not saying something should have happened in the past, but I think that President Trump made a very, very big deal of all of this as a candidate. And moving forward, then I think he has to make good on what he promised to his constituents and to the American people.
Thank you both. I have the next poll question up. The next poll question is, do you agree or disagree that Congress should pass legislation banning stock trading for members of Congress and their families? Again, do you agree or disagree that Congress should pass legislation banning stock trading for members of Congress and their families? Press 1 if you agree, and press 2 if you disagree. We'll move on to our next caller now. We have Ashley joining the call. Ashley, you are live with the Congressman and Congresswoman. Please go ahead with your question.
Hello. I was actually going to ask once again about the Epstein files, but I think that we've all hit on that just about enough. So I don't have a question now, but I would like to just give credit to Congresswoman DeLauro for basically anytime she opens her mouth in Congress. I appreciate you. Just want to say that. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
No.
Thank you.
And on that note, I believe that Congresswoman DeLauro has to go, but I want to thank you again for your generosity of your time tonight, sharing your expertise with, I think we're well over 10,000 listeners and viewers tonight. So thank you for sharing Maryland's second congressional tonight.
I'm delighted to be with you, and delighted to be with you and with your constituents. And as I've said, I just want to say that you have someone who's a fighter, and you listen to him, and he's not, he is measured in what his responses are. He is thoughtful, and he brings unbelievable integrity to this process. And that's the kind of representation that you have bargained for and that you have. And it is an honor for me to serve with Congressman Olszewski. So thank you, and good night to everyone. Best to all of you. Be safe. Thank you, Johnny O.
Thanks again, Rosa. Thanks for the work you're doing leading on the appropriations work. We appreciate you. Have a great night.
Take care. Good night.
And with that, I'll turn things back to our moderator for another question.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you, Congresswoman, again for joining us. We still have time to take questions live. If you would like to ask a question live on today's call, you press *3 now. And if you would like to join the Congressman's newsletter, you can press *6. Our next call comes from Janine, who joins us from Pikesville. Janine, you are live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead with your question.
Good evening, Congressman. Thank you for having the call. It goes back to the question about the funds being released. Again, how is Trump breaking the law when he is not allowing these funds that have been appropriated to the right divisions? And why is he able to do it? And why can't we move this forward and get these funds out?
Great question. And I actually wish I still had Rosa on to make sure that she's checking my math on the answer here. But what President Trump is doing is, I believe, is illegal. Many of you know that I was a school teacher before I came to Congress, before I got involved in politics. And I taught my high school government classes that only Congress has the power of the purse. Congress is the branch of government that appropriates the monies. And in addition to the constitutional power, Congress also subsequently passed the Impoundment Act, which made clear that any money appropriated by Congress had to be spent by the president, by the executive branch for the purpose which it was appropriated. And as we talked about earlier, the only way a president cannot spend that money is if they put forward what's called a rescission, or to undo that spending that was authorized and put into law by Congress. Now, in a couple of places, much to my disappointment, President Trump and his allies in this Republican Congress have, in fact, passed some rescission packages. That is actually legal, even though I think it's wrong to do it and it's not in American interest. Things like cutting PBS, cutting our support of foreign aid, and some other places where there have been significant cuts. However, this administration has also, I think to the point of your question, illegally, in my opinion, withheld the spending of that fund. And so on situations like that, we are actively both in the Congress, in the courts, and in the community pushing back against these actions, which are completely at odds with certainly the spirit and I believe the actual writing of the Constitution and of the Impoundment Act of the 1970s that was passed and enacted by this Congress.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next call comes from Nicholas, who joins us from Owings Mills. Nicholas, you are live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead with your question.
Yes, hello, Congressman Olszewski. First off, I'd like to thank you, your team. Every time I call in, everybody's extremely helpful. So please give them a round of applause when you're off the call for everything they do, because it is vital, vital work. My question is, what can we do to understand and lower the temperature in the room when, yes, it is a tragedy that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. We do not need political violence in this country. There's no place. It's protected by the First Amendment, freedom of speech. But what can we do to lower the temperature and get everyone to listen and come together and say, look, let's stop this, when we have Republican Congressmen and women who are saying the radical Democrats are causing these problems, the radical Democrats this, the radical Democrats that. They don't seem to want to lower the temperature themselves. So how can we do this when half of them don't listen?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and thank you for the feedback. I look forward to sharing that feedback with my staff, many of whom are actually on tonight helping to facilitate the questions. So some of them may have heard the kudos, but I'm happy to share that as well with them. And just so proud of the work that our team does here. I think, the thing I would say is that we have to remember that we have a responsibility to call out the toxicity that we see on any side. And for sure, the rhetoric that we're seeing in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk has been very disappointing. And I think that anyone who wants to fan the flames is doing a disservice, not just to their community, but to this country. And I have a responsibility as a member of Congress. I'm trying to remind my colleagues that they have a responsibility as members of Congress, because it's up to us to change the tone. It's up to us to change the policies in response to tragedies like that, like the other ones I mentioned about the shooting in Minnesota and so many others. I mean, the same day there was also a school shooting in Colorado. What I will say and what I will encourage everyone listening to do is the following. If you see the kind of political toxicity coming from any member or any leader, rather than click the link and watch, mute their account. Don't listen to their Facebook or Twitter or Blue Sky feed. Because what happens is, I think we've gotten into a point where we are incentivizing that kind of political rhetoric and discourse. And while people are free to say whatever they want, and freedom of speech is important, it's sacred. We also have an obligation, I think, as a society in how we respond to it. If someone is being inflammatory and being asked to go on the national news, we don't have to, we can turn off that channel. We can turn off and mute their accounts. I think the more that we feed into it as a society, the more we watch the videos and click likes on their pages, we actually are feeding it. And so for me, the other thing I really try to do, and I would encourage you to push your elected officials to do this as well, is I talked about earlier arguing vociferously and vigorously, but really making sure that we keep it about the issues. This isn't about personalities. At the end of the day, we all have families, we all have loved ones that we are going home to. We all have people that we care about, and we all are pursuing our dreams, or we should be able to pursue our dreams free from violence. And so as we engage in these debates and these fights in the United States Congress, I really try to make sure that people know that I'm criticizing the actions and the consequences of the policies. I do think gutting healthcare and taking away food supports from veterans and children and the elderly is cruel. I think it's short-sighted. I think it's mean. I think it's mean-spirited. But that's the policy. And so I think we have an obligation. It's an imperfect answer, but at the end of the day, we are the ones who can change where we are and where we're going.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next call comes from Alicia, who joins us from Pikesville. Alicia, you are live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead with your question.
Good evening. Two quick questions. What is being done to keep Social Security from being privatized? And also regarding the National Guard, if we know it's illegal for the president to dispatch the Guard into cities because that's the decision of the governor, why don't we take it to court? Why does Representative whom we have to write a letter asking him to reconsider? He's wrong. It's illegal. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And in that letter that I joined Congressman Mfume in writing, we actually reminded the president that his action has been found illegal in court. Los Angeles, and I apologize, you hear the bells in the back for our sessions that are still ongoing here in D.C. But Los Angeles has successfully sued the administration. Of course, the administration has the right, and they are seeking an appeal of that finding. But in the meantime, yeah, we have an obligation to do everything that we can to fight this in the courts, to fight it in Congress, to work with our governors, to work with our mayors, to push back against this action. As we discussed earlier, there's so many reasons why it's wrong and we shouldn't do it. And so I think the other thing is to make sure that individuals are writing to their members of Congress to share their concerns, not just to me. We love hearing from you. I love hearing from Maryland's 2nd Congressional, but also making sure that if you have family members or friends who live across the country, that all members of Congress are hearing from America about this issue.
Thank you, Congressman. We do have one more poll question, and we'll go ahead and get to that now. Do you agree or disagree that Congress should pass legislation requiring the Trump administration to disclose all files related to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation? Again, the poll question to everyone on the call is, do you agree or disagree that Congress should pass legislation requiring the Trump administration to disclose all files related to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation? Press 1 if you agree, and press 2 if you disagree. While the poll answers come in, we'll go ahead and move to our next caller. Next up, we have Theodora, who joins us from Pikesville. Theodora, you're live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead with your question. Theodora, you're live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead with your question.
Hello. How are you tonight,
Hello.
Congressman Olszewski?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. My question is, after the Congresswoman was talking about Medicare, as someone or other people who's ready to retire, how does the whole Medicare, your Social Security, affected by this whole new administration and all these cuts that they're doing?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And what I will say is, for so many Americans like you who have given your life this country, building our communities, serving, working, you shouldn't have to worry about the rising costs of everything: groceries, gas, rent, and of course, healthcare. And I think in the healthcare space in particular, we are seeing an unnecessary removal of supports for Americans. And I worry, especially for our seniors. And in Baltimore County, where I was executive, 25% of our population were seniors, which is why we did a lot of work to try to support that part of our community. But these are really unhelpful and dangerous cuts that are going to make people less healthy. They're going to take money out of people's pockets and really not only threaten the stability of our neighborhoods, but really drive up the cost of living. And we're in a cost of living crisis. Make no mistake about it. It's why every day we've been counting the number of days. Today is 256 days without a single vote to lower costs. And instead, we're seeing costs go up. And it's why we're not only trying to reinstate the cuts that were made in the big ugly bill, but we're also trying to reinstate the healthcare subsidies that are set to expire at the end of this year to help keep healthcare somewhat affordable. It's already a challenge enough. And so, I don't have good answers as to why my colleagues across the aisle have felt it appropriate to make all these cuts. As I said at the start of this call, this is our 4th town hall of dozens of community and open events we've also had in partnership with other organizations. I believe in the dialogue. I believe in the conversation. I'm better as a representative because of it. But what we're seeing is the exact opposite in other parts of the country, where some of my colleagues either aren't having town halls or simply don't have answers to these questions as to why they're supporting it. And I think it's why it's so important that we continue in dialogue, and it's why it's so important that people across this country continue to show up and engage with their elected.
Thank you, Congressman. We are coming close to the end of our call tonight. I'd like to give you a moment to share any closing remarks before I close this out.
Yeah, thanks so much again for everyone to join. I know that we had a bunch of other callers, and if you didn't get to us, we promise we will take your information and make sure that a staff member gets back to you as best we can. Otherwise, please make sure you reach out to our office with your views and your concerns. Thanks for participating in our 4th town hall. Thanks again to my special guest, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro. As your congressman here in Maryland 2nd, I want you to know that I believe in accountability, transparency, and communication. We will continue to offer these kinds of opportunities throughout my term and throughout the district. So with that, I will remind you again, you can press *6 to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on what's going on both in Washington and the district. And with that, I will turn things back over to our moderator. And I thank you all again and hope to see you soon. Stay safe and be blessed, everybody.
Thank you, Congressman. And thank you for joining today's telephone town hall with Congressman Johnny Olszewski. If you'd like to stay up to date on the Congressman's work, please follow him on Instagram, X, and Blue Sky at Rep. Johnny O. Again, that's at Rep. Johnny O. As well as on Facebook at Rep. Johnny Olszewski. If you'd like to subscribe to his newsletter, just stay on the line and leave your name and email address after the tone. Thank you again for joining us, and have a good evening.